Originally built in 1150, the Fantoftstave Church is one of the oldest in Norway. It was built during the proliferation of Christianity in the country, when the peoples moved away from their old pagan traditions. It's the early hours, and Euronymous and Varg stand outside the church, staring at it with contempt. They make their way inside and begin dousing it with gasoline before taking a match and setting the structure alight. Its wooden frame quickly crumbles and the church is destroyed. An image of the destroyed church would later grace the cover of Burzum's EP, Aske, which translates to ashes. Varg and Euronymous had a bit of a rivalry going on as to who could be more evil. The rivalry started a string of church burnings throughout Norway. Euronymous is quoted as saying, in regards to the church burnings,
"The Christians must feel that there is a dark, evil power present that they have to fight, which will make them more extreme. We also believe that when a church burns, it's not only Christians who suffer, but people in general. Imagine a beautiful old stave church. What happens when it burns? The Christians feel despair. God's house is destroyed. And ordinary people will suffer from grief because something beautiful was destroyed. So you end up spreading grief and despair, which is a good thing."
This fiery crusade against Christianity resulted in over 50 attacks by 1996. Those apprehended and held accountable were black metal enthusiasts. This wave of destruction wasn't contained to Norway, with the Swedish black metal scene joining in 1993. Other musicians, such as Samoth of Emperor, along with Jon Inge Tunsberg of Hades Almighty, face convictions for church burnings. When confronted about their actions, they express no remorse, instead framing the arsons as symbolic retaliation against Christianity in Norway. Mayhem's drummer, Hellhammer, advocates for attacks on mosques and Hindu temples, deeming them as foreign elements. Gal of black metal pioneers Gorgoroth lauds these acts, declaring that there should be more of them and that there will be more of them. Conversely, Necro Butcher and Kjetil Mannheim of Mayhem and Abath of Immortal deem the arsons futile. Mannheim suggests they were attempts to seek approval within the black metal scene. Wattain's vocalist Eric Danielson has a different perspective, stating the arsonists succeeded in only defeating the last piece of Christianity within themselves, which he sees as a very good beginning. The media is in a frenzy, and public opinion turns against the black metal scene. Despite this, Euronymous remains passive, almost indifferent. The burning churches and the resulting media attention are, in his eyes, merely stoking the flames of his black metal crusade. Yet this attitude only fuels the tension between him and Varg. Their ideological clash starts to seep into their music, leading to distinct shifts in the sound of both Burzum and Mayhem. Varg's increasingly influential presence in Mayhem also strains his relationship with Euronymous. Their contrasting visions for black metal and their distinct approaches to their craft fuels a simmering tension. Varg's philosophy resonates with a section of the black metal community, propelling his ascent. Euronymous and Mayhem, once undisputed leaders of the black metal scene, now find their position challenged. Varg Vikernes, with his unique vision of black metal and his growing influence, becomes a thorn in Euronymous' side. He allegedly jokes with friends that he plans on torturing and killing Varg and videotaping the event, Word of this would get back to Varg, however. It's at this juncture that things reach boiling point. Varg, convinced that Euronymous owes him a ton of royalties for Burzum's record sales, asks to opt out of his contract with Death Like Silence Productions. Euronymous, by this point growing weary of the rising tensions in the community, complies and mails Varg a copy of the contract. Not content to merely sign it and mail it back, Varg gets in his car and proceeds to make the 500-kilometer journey from Bergen to Oslo. But he's not alone. He's with Blackthorn. But before they go, they stop at a video store, renting videos with Varg's credit card. Something Varg would use as an alibi. It's a chilly August evening in 1993. Oslo is winding down, its inhabitants unaware of what's about to unfold. Euronymous rests in his apartment, perhaps contemplating the recent turbulence in Mayhem or the band's future trajectory. A knock on the door breaks his thoughts. It's Varg. Euronymous makes his way over to the door and opens it. Varg holds the signed contract in his hand, a tangible sign of their deteriorating relationship. Euronymous finds this odd and a little confronting. It's late at night, and Varg lives 500 kilometers away. Why would he travel such a distance to return the contract when he could have simply mailed it? But Varg pushes his way into the apartment, and a conversation initially focused on the contract begins. There's a brief moment of conciliation as Euronymous signs it. He wants to put their differences aside, to continue their friendship. For a fleeting moment, it appears that things might be salvageable. But then, the atmosphere shifts. An argument ensues. Years of suppressed resentment, ideological disputes, and personal affronts bubble over. In the ensuing chaos, Varg pulls out a knife and stabs Euronymous in the stomach. Euronymous, initially shocked by this, attempts to flee. A horrifying chase through the apartment ensues. Varg stabs him again, this time in the back, and again to the neck, and again, and again. Euronymous somehow manages to make his way to the front door and enter into the building's hallway, knocking on doors, pleading for help. But it's too late. Varg closes in again and stabs Euronymous once more, in the neck, once more, in the back, again and again and again. Blade meets flesh, until finally, Euronymous collapses onto the floor. Varg assumes a position with his knees around Euronymous' hips, raises his blade, and with one final fatal swoop, brings the knife down into Euronymous' head, ending the 25-year-old's life. Euronymous lies motionless on the building's stairwell, covered in blood. In all, his body is found with 23 stab wounds, 2 to the head, 5 to the neck, and 16 to the back. The following morning, Oslo wakes to the news of the shocking murder. Euronymous, the beating heart of the black metal scene, is no more. The black metal community is left reeling. The driving force behind a genre, a musical visionary, has been silenced. Varg's involvement in the murder is undeniable, and he's arrested. He insists it was self-defense, but the evidence tells a different story. As Varg stands trial, Norway watches with morbid fascination. The previously insular black metal scene is thrust into a harsh spotlight. The violence and controversy surrounding it captivate and repulse in equal measure. Euronymous' trial begins on the 2nd of May 1994, and he's represented by lawyer Stein Erik Madsen, Many other members of the black metal scene, including Blackthorn and Faust, are put on trial around the same time. Some of them confess and also implicate others. Years later, Vikernes would say that he was disgusted by the fact that while he held fast to a code of silence, others confessed. During the trial, the media made Vikernes the nation's first real boogeyman in 50 years. It was claimed that he, Blackthorn, and another friend had planned the murder. The court alleged that this third person stayed at the apartment in Bergen as an alibi. To make it look like they never left Bergen, the court reaches its decision and delivers its verdict. On the accounts of the theft and storage of 150 kilos of explosives, we find the defendant guilty. On the counts of the attempted arson of a fourth church, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of the arson of 3 churches, we find the defendant guilty. And on the count of the murder of Oystein Aarseth, we find the defendant guilty. Vikernes would be sentenced to 21 years in prison, Norway's maximum penalty. Blackthorn, who hadn't taken part in the murder, as he had gone down to the building's stairs to smoke, was sentenced to 8 years in prison for being an accomplice. May 1994 finally sees the release of Mayhem's album, De Mysteries Dom Satanas, by now 10 years in the making, on which Euronymous plays guitar and Vikernes plays bass. The album features one of the most iconic black metal songs of all time, Freezing Moon. Before its release, Euronymous' family asks Mayhem's drummer, Hellhammer, to remove the bass tracks recorded by Vikernes. Hellhammer agrees and puts the word out that he has re-recorded the bass parts, but he never does. With only Attila and Hellhammer remaining, Mayhem ceases to exist. But in 1995, an unauthorized live recording from a 1990 concert surfaces, ominously titled The Dawn of the Black Hearts. Despite its bootleg status, it's often cited as one of Mayhem's core releases, mainly because of its morbid cover art. A shocking post-suicide photograph of Dead, taken by Euronymous. Around this time, a phoenix-like rebirth of Mayhem begins. Hellhammer, Maniac, and Necrobutcher regroup, welcoming guitarist Rune Eriksson, aka Blasphemer, into the fold to fill Euronymous' spot. The decision to reform without founding member Euronymous stirs controversy and skepticism. Unfazed, the band makes a bold return in 1997 with their EP, Wolfslayer Abyss. However, it's not free from controversy. Statements by Hellhammer denouncing race mixing and foreign presences in Norway, along with the band's use of contentious symbols like swastikas and the Totenkopf emblem, attract accusations of neo-Nazism. Interestingly, Hellhammer clarifies that none of the members in the new lineup are Satanists, stating that while Mayhem's music retains its dark edge, he wouldn't label it satanic in the present context. Fast forward to today, and Mayhem have gone on to become a pillar of the black metal movement, having released 5 albums since 2000's Grand Declarations of War. Despite his imprisonment in 1994, Varg would continue to work on music, recording 2 albums from prison and a further 6 after his release in 2009. But Burzum, to this day, true to Varg's philosophical convictions, has never performed live. In the years since Euronymous' murder, Varg would show no signs of remorse, while he would come under fire for anti-Semitic views and inciting racial hatred, openly supporting 2011's racially motivated terrorist attacks in Norway, which claimed the lives of 77 people. Curiously, Necrobutcher today says that Varg beat him to the punch.
Okay, I can tell it right now because I've been holding it in for many years, but actually I was on my way down to kill him myself. And when it happened, I saw the morning paper thinking, ooh, fuck, I gotta get home to my place and get out all the weapons and drugs and shit I had in my house because they're coming to my house because I'm probably gonna be the one suspect for this. But little did I know that the Norwegian police already knew that Count Grishnak. Varg was going down also to kill him because they bugged his phone and he actually talked about this killing before he went to Bergen. So the cops already knew that he was coming, so they probably were thinking to themselves, we didn't nail this guy for the church burning, so let's nail him for murder and get rid of this fucking guy in Oslo at the same time. So that's basically what happened.
While there remains a lot of conjecture about the formative years of the black metal scene, the goings-on in Norway in the early 90s are without peers. Both Burzum and Mayhem have gone on to inspire generations of black metal bands. Immortal, Watain, Behemoth, Dark Funeral, Dark Throne, Emperor, Borknagar, and the more palatable to the masses and commercially successful Dimmu Borgir. Euronymous, despite having only ever appeared on one legitimate full-length studio album and several posthumous releases, would go on to be ranked number 51 in Guitar World's list of the 100 greatest metal guitarists of all time. In March 2012, low-cost carrier Norwegian Air Shuttle set up a public poll asking customers to pick a famous Norwegian historical figure whose picture would decorate the aircraft's tail fin. Largely, on the strength of international fans, Arseth was leading the poll, but his name was removed from the campaign at his family's request. In 2018, a film by the name Lords of Chaos, based on the eponymous book, is released as a semi-fictionalized account of the early 90s Norwegian black metal scene, with Euronymous being played by Macaulay Culkin's younger brother, Rory Culkin. For the most part though, black metal remains underground, and while it's flirted with commercialization and at times become considered a bit of a fad, for black metal purists like Varg Vikernes, free from commercial incentives is how it should remain. Thus concludes this mini-season of Battle in the Bands on Mayhem vs. Burzum. If you enjoyed this, take a moment to like, share, subscribe, leave us a review, and do all that good stuff. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, using the handles Battle Bands Pod. You can find our Facebook group on Facebook, just look for Battle of the Bands Podcast, and you can find us on YouTube. These pages are all new, so we'd love to see you join us. If you'd like to get notified whenever we drop a new season, sign up to our mailing list over at battleofthebandspod.com. Some of the quotes you heard in this season were AI-generated recreations of words said on the record. My name is Steve Glaveski. I researched, wrote, recorded, and produced this season of Battle of the Bands. Until next time, keep those headphones in and those horns up.